Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial. The purpose of this video is to explain you how to configure full Avid workflow in IN2IT Exchange. The first thing we will see is how to configure an ingest workflow, and after being logged in the IN2IT Exchange admin, we will go to the connectors tab. We need to create a connector to communicate with the Avid web services, which are the way we have to check in and check out assets in the PAM. So you can see here that I have already created a connector. You can do the same by clicking on the new connector button here. And what we will need here is the endpoint of the Avid Interplay Web Services and the port and the user and the password. We also need to know the name of the workgroup that has been configured in the web services. So if we look here at the web services page, we can go to view configuration and we can see what is the workgroup name that has been configured. If you are planning to do an export workflow and to use Avid transcode to render out the sequences, make sure that the media services are correctly set up here. Once you have created your connector, you can save it. You don't need the interplay ID at the moment. It is only used in some very specific workflows where we are integrating also with iNews, and we will not cover that in this tutorial. Now that we have created a connector, we can create a profile. The profile is basically the workflow that determines what will happen. So we will create a new profile, and the source type for this profile will be media. We give it a name, and then we select a trigger. The trigger is the user interface or the automated workflow where the workflow will be started. So it can be started from IN2IT Access user interface, it can be started from IN2IT Upload, or it can be started from the Media Center Cloud UX panel or a watch folder. So if you are handling several workflows, you can have several profiles, but you can also have more than one trigger in the same profile. For now, we will see how we trigger an ingest from the Media Center Cloud UX Access panel. So I will define that, and we will say that the users will be able to upload their files through the app, through the Cloud UX app, directly to the server. As it is a manual ingest that will be performed from Media Center Cloud UX, we can decide if we want the users to add metadata during the process. So here you can create your own metadata fields. For example, I can create a text metadata that I will name title, and I can create a list metadata that I will name category. And I can define here the list of values that I want to have in my categories. Business, entertainment, politics, sports. You will see that we can use this metadata in various ways during the workflow. So we have created the custom metadata fields that we will be displaying to the user who is performing an ingest. We can also decide if this metadata is mandatory or optional. So we can here make this metadata mandatory. After that, we need to decide what will happen with this media that we are ingesting. So as we are ingesting to an Avid PAM and an Nexus storage, we will select Avid Media as the processing mode. We have other processing modes. The most used other one is the AV file to create generic MXFOP1A or MP4. We are creating Avid media file. We need to decide in which format. Here is the transcoding rule that we can have, where we can define what is the target format for the footage. So let's say, for example, that I want to ingest everything in XDCAM HD50. 1080i. That means that all the content will be converted to this format. If something is already in XDCAM HD50, of course, it will not be converted. It will be maintained in the same format. You can add additional transcoding conditions depending on the source, source frame rate, source format. For example, if we say that we want that the footage that is already in AVC Intra 100 is kept as it is, we can say, okay, everything which is AVC Intra 100 will be rewrapped. Everything else will be transcoded to XDCAM HD50. For an Avid workflow, we can enable the multi-resolution and decide a second resolution that will be created, like an H.264 proxy, and that will be checked in with the same asset in the PAM. We have also other processing options regarding the source files that contain alpha channel, regarding the stitching of the clips if we have multiple clips in our workflow, and some other parameters that you can see here. Now that we have configured the media processing, we need to say what will happen with the delivery. So in our case, we want to deliver to Avid PAM system. We select Avid PAM and we have to define where the media files will go and where the assets will go in the database. For the media files, we can select here default SMB, and what will go here is the path of my Nexus storage. So I am here locating the target folder on my Nexus storage. And as you can see here, I can use some metadata to automatically, dynamically calculate the path of the storage if the metadata is given as an input parameter. We can also define now the folder for the check-in. So here I will say that I want to check in incoming media /demo. And then I would like to create a folder with the date of today, so the ingest date. And then I would like to create a folder per category. You can see here that you can use the metadata to dynamically calculate the target folder in the PAM. We can also enable the edit while ingest feature, so the file will be immediately available in the PAM and in Media Composer and Media Center Cloud UX as soon as it starts being ingested. Then we have the metadata mapping. So here is about how do you want to name your asset. By default, it will have the same name that the source file. But if you want to use the title instead that the user has added, you can do that as well. You can also do some mapping to other Avid interplay fields like the comments if you want to map the category. Also as a metadata in the comments, this is something that you can do here. We have two extra options here for Avid PAM delivery. One will create a sequence for each clip that is ingested, and the second one will create a shortlist, which is a sequence containing all the clips of your ingest. You can add more deliveries or more processing to these workflows, and you can also add some notifications if you want. Now we have a workflow that is ready where people will upload content through Media Center Cloud UX panel using the browser, and then this content will be transcoded to XDCAM HD50, except if it's IVCI, and will be delivered to Nexus and to the PAM. Let's move now to Media Center Cloud UX. And we will go to the admin first so I can show you the settings of the Cloud UX app. When you are in Media Central Cloud UX and your app has been deployed, we have a user manual for that, then you can go here and we can check what is the IN2IT endpoint for the Access app. The Access app is the ingest app. So here we will modify the endpoint to use the same server where we have done the configuration just 1 minute ago. This is now done, so we can connect as a normal user. And now we are able to open the IN2IT Access app. We need to log in. And now we see our profile demo Avid ingest that is available. We select demo Avid ingest, and we have here on the left, on the right-hand side, the metadata fields that we have configured. We can select the file that we want to upload. Let's say these two MP4 files. And we set the metadata that have been defined in my profile. Then we can start the upload. The first progress bar is the upload of the content from my desktop to the server. And the second part is the workflow that is actually happening on the server to transcode this content and deliver it to the PAM. If we go back to IN2IT Exchange, we can check here the global monitoring, where we can see that we have two clips that will be processed and delivered to the PAM. Now that the process is finished, we can go back to Media Central and we can check here that our assets have been created in incoming media, demo, date of today, category, and then we have our two clips that have been renamed according to the rule that we have defined in the profile. We could have added an index or the original file name to distinguish the name of the two clips in our naming rule. So this is for a manual ingest from Media Central Cloud UX. If we look at the profile that we have just created, we can duplicate it now with the copy button here, and we can create a similar profile for a watch folder ingest. So now we will remove this trigger and we will add a watch folder trigger. Of course, as it is a watch folder, there is no one to manually add metadata. So we will remove the metadata fields here. And of course, here we can't use this metadata because they are not existing. So we will instead use the original name of the file. And we can also append the date like the ingest date if we want. Category also is not necessary here. Okay, the rest of the profile will be very similar to the first one. We can save it, and now we can configure a watch folder. So you can configure more or less complex watch folders. For now, we will just consider a media file watch folder, but you can also have watch folder with metadata file to handle some XML sidecar. You can have camera cards watch folder, and you can have also Avid PAM watch folders. So what we need to decide is what is the profile that will be used to process the files that will be received. This is it. We have an option to process files while growing with certain limitations, but if you have files incoming and you want to start processing them, this is something that is possible. And then we need to decide where is the watch folder located. As you can see here, we can watch files from a local storage or network storage, but also from a cloud storage. So we can use IN2IT Exchange to retrieve content from the cloud and to ingest it in your local system. Then here we will put the path of the folder to be watched. So that can be generally a UNC path that we will use here. Okay. I will use this one. All right. We can also decide if we want to apply some filtering on the file names, if we want to watch the subfolders and not just the main folder, and if we want to have a minimum file size for the files that we are processing. We can also decide what happens after processing if we want to delete the source file or to move the source file to a different location. Like here, we can say we want to move the source file to a subfolder of my watch folder, so that will be very obvious for the administrators or the media managers to know if a file has been properly processed or not. Now my watch folder is ready. I can go to my Manager tab and I can start the watch folder that I have just created. I forgot to give it a name, so it's named New Watch Folder. Let's come back here and rename it. And now we can start it from the manager. It is starting here. And here we can check with the loop duration that everything is okay. And we can see when the last file has been detected. And now if we go to the monitoring, we can see that all these files that were already in my watch folder has been detected and are now being processed by IN2IT Exchange. They are being automatically transcoded or rewrapped if they are already at the right format, and they are being delivered to my media center system, to my Avid interplay system, in the folder that was determined in the profile. If I look here in my Avid system, in incoming media demo, date of today, we have now the files coming in from the watch folder alongside with the files that we have ingested before. And they have, of course, all been transcoded to the right format that we have determined in the profile. So now you are able to configure an automated ingest profile with watch folder and a manual ingest profile with the Media Central Cloud UX. If you want to configure an ingest profile for camera cards, it's exactly the same, but you will simply here select a different trigger, which will be IN2IT Access. Now we will see how we configure an export workflow from Media Central Cloud UX. So we will use the same connector, but this time we will retrieve media from Avid PAM and we will deliver it to the target system. So here I have created an export OP1A profile that can be triggered either from the Cloud UX panel in Media Central or from an interplay watch folder. The important thing here is that the type of this source is an Avid PAM asset, a clips or a sequence. We have to configure some Avid PAM settings here to make sure that the asset will be retrieved from the right PAM and that we have a mixdown that can happen if necessary on the sequence before the asset is processed. The mixdown is done by Avid transcode, triggered and controlled dynamically by Woody, and we only have to provide some settings here to make sure that the mixdown is performed properly. The transcode provider is an optional setting. The workspace is the name of the Nexus workspace where the mixdown will be done. The check-in folder is just a temporary folder where the mixdown asset will land, and the priority is to queue this job properly with the other jobs that can be submitted to the production services. The 50 is the default value for that. If we want the users to add some metadata in the Cloud UX panel before export, we can also here create some metadata fields. It's not the case in this profile, but I will show you in another one. And then again, we will decide what happens with the file after it's exported, so or during the export. So here we are creating an MXF OP1A that is in XDCAM HD50. You can also create MP4, still images, audio-only files, and all sorts of flavors in this section. Finally, we decide where we deliver the file that is exported from Avid. So in this case, it's just network storage, but we can also, of course, upload that to FTP using Aspera, Signiant, File Catalyst, upload to cloud storage, upload to Google Drive or Dropbox. and it's just a few examples. We will output, of course, the media file, but also we can create a sidecar metadata file, so a sidecar XML that will contain all the metadata from the source asset in Avid and the metadata that have been added by the users during the process, if there is any. And finally, again, we will decide what is the naming convention for the resulting file on the storage, and we can add some notifications. You can see here that we have multiple profiles that we can create to export to multiple destinations, and sometimes we also want the users to be able to add some metadata, like export to CMS, export to Google Drive, export to Limecraft, export to YouTube. You can create multiple profiles here. So now let's get back to Media Center Cloud UX to see how it works. So we will now open the second app, the IN2IT Exchange app. You need to configure it in the admin of Media Center Cloud UX, like we have seen a bit earlier in this video for the other app. And then here you can select your target profile. If metadata needs to be added, it will be displayed here, as you can see. It can be different metadata depending on the profile, so you can really manage a lot of destinations. And of course, you can filter out these profiles per user, so you can define which user has access to which profile. And then you will just drag and drop here the assets that you want to export, and you will click on the process button, and IN2IT Exchange will do the mix down if necessary. That's not the case here because these are clips, and will process them out and export them to the final destination. And as a result, you will get a file exported on the network storage, in this case, that you can work with. Here we go. So this is how you configure an export workflow with IN2IT Exchange. I hope that this video was useful for you to get the basics on how to configure an Avid workflow in IN2IT Exchange. If you have more questions, please contact our support team at support.woody-technologies.com.